And welcome everyone to Rock M Radio. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. We are on season 7, episode something. I've lost track. You'll notice if you're watching us on YouTube, I hope you are joining us on YouTube, that we have a motif here where there's 3 boxes instead of our normal 2. So I am your host, Sam Snelling, and with me, as always, is Matt, but now we have 2 Matts. So Matt Harris, Matt Watkins. I am the only non-Matt in the room, and we are here to broadcast. We are live for Rock M Plus subscribers. Looks like a light turnout early so far, but to be expected for a new service. Matt Harris, let's start with you. How are things in Indy?
Things are well here. Granted, Purdue has not played a basketball game yet this week, so they could always get worse. Last week it was IU fans that were anxious, and now it's Purdue fans this week. So we'll see how it goes here. Otherwise, the weather can't decide what it's going to do, and I think my wife wants to kill me because I'm looking at entirely too many spreadsheets for guys from small colleges who are looking to relocate their services. So we'll see if I survive the week at this rate.
Lots of guys from small colleges. Watkins, what's going on down there in Glendale?
Not much. Keeping busy. Grinding.
Yeah. Grinding the synergy. So I think we're all 3 excited because the synergy sub has been upgraded, and so now we get video. And I think that's actually going to benefit subscribers quite a bit, because not only are we going to be able to provide full scouts, it's going to save Matt Harris quite a bit of time. But the amount of like video production that could kind of come out of this, as far as providing scouting stuff, is good. So let's kind of start with like the most recent I guess news here. We'll start with additions to the roster. We do have some subtractions to talk to, but we'll get to those down the road. Jacob Cruz, a 6'8" kind of combo forwardy type dude out of UT Martin by way of a junior college, decided to commit to the University of Missouri. I believe he was on his visit and when he committed, and so now he's going to join the Tigers for the 2024-25 season. He'll be a senior, shoots the ball well. I think this is a good pickup. I think both of you guys think it's a good pickup. Watkins, what stood out to you about Mr. Cruz?
Shooting. I mean, he's a 6'8" guy. When you look at some of the problems that befell this team this year, they had, on a given night, 2 guys at most who could knock down an outside shot, which was a stark contrast from a year ago. But when you look at the guys that were doing that, Tamar Bates, good size wing, he's multi-purpose. And then you had Nick Honor, who by the end of the year had pretty much morphed into a long jump shooter only when it came to knocking down shots, and his size contributed to that. Nick wasn't just taking 3-pointers, he was taking shots 10 feet behind the line, and he was knocking them down at a fair clip. But that Missouri just wasn't able to score enough. They weren't able to shoot well enough. And when you add a guy who is 6'8", who can shoot it very well off the catch, whether he's guarded or not, and has the added component of being able to score off the dribble, he's got a very, very efficient pull-up jumper. Those things are something that this team lacked. Sean East could do those things, but other than that, Missouri was lacking in a guy who could really be a mobile jump shooter. So when you add a guy with that size, you've already changed the dynamic of the offense going into next year.
Harris?
Yeah, I'll pick up that sort of thread and say I think the one thing that stands out to me when you go onto the tape here is sometimes when you watch guys come up from this level, there's, I guess, some compromises in terms of what their jumper looks like. Maybe it's a little bit slow. Maybe there's some mechanical issues here, and you always wonder how sort of that shot's going to translate. But having watched, I think about 15 or 20 minutes of Jacob's shooting, I think what stands out is really clean, fluid, compact shot motion. Can get it off in a phone booth, which I think is important. And to Watkins' point, at his size, I think it's going to really help him because it's going to be harder to close him down. Even if you've got fours that have tried to close him, he's been able to get the rim sighted and get a shot off pretty elevated. His release point's really high as well. So, we always have to see what it plays out, but it looks just like, on, tape, that's a shot that you think could translate to the SEC level, which is really, really important for this team. I think there are some guys that, we looked at in past portal years where the shooting numbers looked encouraging, but you kind of, when you put on the tape, wondered, okay, is it going to be quick enough? Is it going to be able to be a tool that's going to scale to a high major level? So I think there's early signs that you can see that with Jacob. I think the thing is, too, he can shoot off efficient motion, too. He can take a dribble handoff, take a rhythm dribble, and get a shot off. Pick and roll, a lot of times when he's playing that, it's one dribble, get it up. When he's shooting off the bounce in a spot up, it's usually a rhythm dribble to his left and he's getting it off. There's not a lot of wasted dribbles before he gets into it. It's mostly a rhythm dribble to let him reestablish a base and shoot. So I think that's really good. Here, you're not going to have a guy who's going to pound out, stuff and really take away an advantage. Does some other interesting things. Really good cutter. Can play in a straight line at times, driving to his left. But I think the main thing here is going to be the shot, and at his size, of being able to space the floor out. Defensively, I think there's always questions, about sometimes these guys. At least when I've been able to watch them a little bit, I think sometimes you worry about the lateral ability and sort of things like that. But also, the scheme he was playing in was much more sort of a pack line-ish kind of keep things in front scheme. So we'll see how he translates defensively at this level. But again, to echo Watkins, I think the shot tool is what you're signing on for here. And to get that sort of secured this early, especially when you look at the list of programs that were coming in, for Cruz is really, really impressive. That this was not a sort of weird, strange hodgepodge. There were really solid high major programs, and including the likes of Gonzaga, Kansas, UCLA, that were reaching out and trying to maybe establish some contact here. So for Missouri to get this done in 2 or 3 days and fill a need is really, really impressive. So those are just sort of the initial thoughts there. They filled a need, they did it quickly, and they got a guy who I think at least early on, we may go watch some full game tapes for more context. But I think on, sort of first blush, that this is a guy that can kind of fill a pressing need for this team. We'll see how they build off of it, but I think they've addressed a critical need pretty early.
Yeah, and I'd also kind of point out, I feel like there was a little bit of pushback, and not really from Missouri fans. I saw this from some other kind of fan bases who were commenting on the fact that this had to be tampering because he committed so fast after the portal opened. And I'm like, well, so his coach got fired, and because of that, or his coach left.
No, his coach. I think his coach got extended. I thought.
No. His coach was either fired or left for another job.
I believe he went to take another job, and it may have been an assistant job if I remember right.
Okay.
But he left.
Yeah, so he left the program, and so when that happens, you can enter the transfer portal right away.
Yeah,
it's the same thing as anybody from Ohio State could have entered the transfer portal the moment Chris Holtmann was fired, and so he's been in the portal for a little while. Not a long while, because his coach did just leave, last week, but he was in the transfer portal last week. So Missouri had time to establish contact. They had time to get him to campus, and they did have time to kind of close that down. Sometimes it happens quickly, like we saw with John Tanji last year. Hopefully, this proves a more fruitful recruitment for such a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
No offense to what we got from Mr. Tanji this year, but I certainly think the coaching staff is hoping to get more out of. Do either of you think this is a guy who's going to fill in a starting position? Are you still TBD on that, or because I think he projects really well to the 4 spot, but I think some of our sources are indicating that maybe the spot may be the 3 for him.
Yeah, I think that's sort of been the projection here is as a 3. Now, we'll see what happens after we, account for people out the door here. I don't think it's outlandish to call him a 3 necessarily, just because I think if you really look at his tape, he's not playing, I think some of the ways that Noah Carter was used. I think he only posts up like 7% of the time. He's not a guy that, at least on the defensive end, is always guarding a 4. So I think he's a bigger bodied 3. I think it's just going to be a question of what the final composition of the roster looks like before, we feel comfortable about talking about roles and sort of where he fits. I don't think he would have come here if he didn't feel like he was going to be in line for a major spot, but we'll see what that looks like once the roster shakes out. But I don't think it's outlandish to call him a jumbo wing. We've just got to have a full picture of what the roster around him is going to look like before I think we can really project the scale and scope of what he's going to do.
Watkins, you have a take in it? You think we're going to see Mr. Cruz as a starter come November?
Yeah, it's a wait and see. We'll have to see what else happens this spring. But Mizzou is pretty deep at the off-ball perimeter spots right now. We'll call it. And it depends on if you've got a Caleb Grill returning, a John Tonje returning, Tamar Bates returning. You've got 2 freshmen that are going to be vying for minutes there with Boateng and Allen. So, it's not to say that he's not going to start. It's not going to say that he is. It's really kind of hard to say at this time. I would agree that he doesn't quite have the skill set to profile much as an interior player. Not to say that he couldn't play there for spot minutes or develop into one, but that's not what his skill set is right now. So, it's completely up in the air. But he's got the most important skill in basketball. Being able to knock down shots that's the separator. So, if they've got 5 guys who can knock down shots on the floor, then he may have a little harder time getting in there. If they've got 2, then he's going to get a lot of time.
Yeah, I do think it'll be interesting to see as like the roster sort of progresses, because you do sort of notice a little bit of a glut happening at like that kind of 3-4 spot. Whether it's a guy like Boateng, whether it's a guy like Bates, and I know we've kind of listed Bates as more of a combo guard. But I think he's as much a combo guard as he plays like the 2, and not so much that he's like really a secondary ball handler. Like, he's capable of handling the ball, but he's not a guy who you're going to have as your primary ball handler at any point. And I think that's kind of what when I think of a combo guard, I think a guy that can kind of step in and handle the ball if needed.
The one thing I would say too is Watkins spent plenty of time in January and February sort of outlining the program build and the template that's being used here. What had always defined Ham's teams at Florida State, like 7 dudes between like 6'6" and like 6'9", and you just kind of, and 3 of them would be on the floor at once, and it was sort of nebulous as to what their positional fit was. It was just 3 really long dudes, a point guard and a big, and you just sort of like things sort of sorted themselves out. Now I think they're trying to maybe get more of a true secondary kind of ball handler because the system sort of needs it. But I also don't think from a roster build perspective, this is sort of muddled. I think there's some clear influences at play here. It's just, we've got to see, how roles sort of sift. But I think, the one thing I would say too, is I think there's a feeling internally that they've got to get bigger across the board. I think they came out of this year really realizing that a lot of their issues somewhat defensively stem from they were undersized at a lot of perimeter positions. Mm-hmm. We talk about it all the time in the SEC. It's an athletic kind of at the rim league. Missouri was small at all 3 guard positions. And I think we saw those guards get targeted in different ways, but Cruz is a bigger bodied 6'8" guy. And if he's playing on the wing, like Tamar is probably 6'4", 6'5". Well, now you've got a guy who's 3 inches bigger on the wing. Caleb Grill's probably close to 6'4". You've got a guy who's 4 inches bigger playing on the wing, and you haven't sacrificed a shot tool in the process. So I don't think it's a reach to call him a wing. This may just be part of a dual process to get A, more shooting, and B, scale up the size of the rotation that, really could be exploited at times, in mismatches on the perimeter.
I don't know if you guys saw right here, Ibby stopped in to say hello. This is my dog here.
I was just going to ask how Jacob Cruz compares to Sam Snelling's basketball game.
Yeah. I mean, in as much that we're both tall and he's definitely bulkier. I think the most I topped out was maybe about 195 while I was in college. Yeah, I don't think I would compare myself much to him. I could jump a little bit when I was younger, but definitely not going into like bang any bodies. So I do like I do think it's interesting when you kind of talk about like that increasing positional size. For the last couple of years, and I think we've kind of brought this up on the podcast. But I feel like last year Missouri learned the lesson of that they could play small and they could play this style. They could shoot a lot and they could take advantage of other teams that were bigger. And what they sort of realized this year is if you don't shoot really well, and they didn't, it becomes like a way harder to sort of max out those mismatches, which they pivot away from being a mismatch in your favor and then become a mismatch in favor of the other team. Your inability to stop anybody defensively, inability to get rebounds, all those kinds of things. And I think what it looks like so far, if you're bringing a guy in that's 6'8" with a good solid athlete, great shooter, and you're having him or expecting him to play more at the three, then that sort of speaks to me that we are seeing a bit more of that fundamental shift to what I think Matt Watkins spent the late winter chronicling about like the shift of the roster. And I'll let either of you respond to that if you want.
No,
I spent 10,000 words on it. I think I'm good.
Okay.
Like that.
What'll be interesting is what they do, moving forward at the next sort of, I think, maybe at the 4 spot, I think will be interesting what they want to do next.
Well, let's talk about that. You want to talk about the 4 spot?
Sure. There's one name I think we're all sort of watching. He's a Tolton kid. He's a Como kid. Javon Porter, Pepperdine transfer. I think among us, there's modest disagreement about our feelings on a homecoming. I think Watkins. I'll let Watkins make his case. For me, I see both sides of it. The numbers in the tape last year from Pepperdine are a little sobering in the fact that I don't think the jump shooting numbers are really what people would have expected. He shot less than 30% overall from 3. Was not particularly good in like typical spot up situations. He was better out of pick and pops. Was pretty good driving the ball a little bit sometimes out of those situations, but the rim finishing numbers just a top line were average. So, I don't think anyone doubts that, Javon has flashed some skill, and particularly at 6'11", that there's some intrigue there. The question I think you run into as you try and evaluate this is, was there stalled development on his side? Was this a function of just Lorenzo Romar not getting the most out of his talent there? Untangling that, I think, sometimes is harder than we think. And, I'm just sort of curious, how much of this is on the player versus how much of it was on circumstances. But you can look at in his freshman year when circumstances were healthier, he shot the ball pretty well for a freshman, particularly a freshman at his size. You can't deny sort of the length and sort of the fit sort of matches with what you want at a a modern four. But this is going to be a reboot. And, the question I think you have to ask from a roster building perspective is how many reboots can you take on? And I think it was a year where there's not as much political capital for growing pains after you go 0-19. So I see the case. We've seen some potential there, but I guess the thing is, in a year where maybe you have to generate more certain return, is it worth, looking at a guy like Javon? I can go either way on it, but there is some hesitation from my perspective because I think we're going to see really good fours start coming into the portal. We saw some last week. I think we're going to see more of them over the next week. So do you try and make a move now and bet on a rehab sort of effort, or do you stay patient and maybe go get a little bit more proven commodity? That's sort of where I'm at on. But I'll let Watkins take the baton from here and sort of.
Well, yeah, I do think it's important, because Watkins, you are kind of, I would say maybe the most positive on the possibility of adding, Javon Porter to the roster. Tell me about that.
Sell me.
Sam, you've said it yourself. You want to bet on talent. The way that you get better is you get guys who are going to end up playing professional basketball. I think of the guys that Mizzou is looking at reasonably and could reasonably attain. Porter is a guy that fits that mold. When I watched his games, and I watched several of them, including some of the, West Coast Conference tournament games, he fits a lot more of the Michael Porter mold than Jonte, in my opinion. Jonte is more of an interior player. Michael's more of a very tall guard. Javon is not. Is it Javon or Javon?
I think it's Javon.
Okay, yeah. I just want to make sure I'm saying it right. Yeah. So with Javon, you're seeing a guy that fits that mold. He's obviously not as skilled or as advanced as Michael was, even as a freshman at Mizzou, and certainly not now. But there's a reason those guys are highly coveted, both in the NBA and college basketball. Being able to shoot at 6'11", both off the dribble and off the catch, those are very valuable traits. Being able to work your way inside somewhat, although that's not his game. As an aside, for one entire half against, I believe it was San Diego, if I remember.
I'm happy you didn't say Pacific.
No,
no one learned anything from the Pacific game. No one learned a thing from that.
I did not watch that game, but against San Diego, every touch was him getting force-fed in the post, and it was
not good.
Like, what are we doing here? And they were double, triple teaming him down there. And it's like, I believe at that point in time, Millette, who recently committed to Alabama, was out. So the defense was just swarming him in the post. And in the second half, they let him play out on the perimeter, and I think he scored 12, 14 points in the second half. It wasn't enough, but you see it does take some envisioning, but you see why there's interest and why there's some amount of pro interest in him already, based on his pedigree. He's got two brothers in the NBA. All of his sisters have been very successful college basketball players, but he's not quite there. But you look back at his freshman year numbers. He was shooting the ball 60th, 70th percentile as a 6'10", 6'11" freshman. Had you projected that out to even modest improvements in year two, he's gone. He's looking at an NBA career right now. That didn't happen. He injured his knee, which, shocker, Porter was hurt.
Look, I didn't want to broach that subject, but
so on the one hand, the injuries are a concern. It's well documented. That's always something that's going to be talked about. On the other hand, you can also attribute some of his struggles to not getting into the flow of things until December or January of this year, which very well could have affected his production. So, I'm not 100% saying that Javon Porter is going to come here and be an all-SEC player next year. What I am saying is I think when you're looking for potential and when you're looking at skill sets, he has a lot of the things you want to see.
So I will say, like, my skepticism comes from a couple areas here. One being the Porters. As you know, somebody who covered this team extensively, I feel like, you know, and this is a little bit more of like me making a judgment versus like a lot of sort of inside information. But I feel like dealing with the Porters kind of broke Konzo Martin a little bit. And he kind of like, it felt like he kind of gave up on like chasing any really kind of talented players after that. No offense to anybody who signed at Missouri during the Konzo Martin years, but you know, if his name wasn't Javon Porter, if I was just looking at this as a guy who committed to Lorenzo Romar at Pepperdine, had a great season, was on NBA draft boards kind of going into his sophomore year, got hurt and never quite got on track, had the skill set that he had or has, and the potential shooting ability that he does possess, I would say I would be probably way more on board with this scenario than it is for what it is. Just mainly because of a little bit of that, still a little, you know, shell shocked from, you know, the first round of the Porters and the injuries and, you know, the behind the scenes drama and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. You know, I know the Porters are a very close knit family, and you know, like how that plays into, you know, the role. I mean, he will be back home basically. I'm not entirely sure if the Porters are still living in Columbia, but I assume they are. I feel like the younger kids are still going to Tolton. But yeah, so like there's some hesitation, but it's mostly out of that. And I will say that, you know, if he can get it right, you know, Javon is a guy who could absolutely, you know, be 1 year at Missouri and be a, you know, anywhere between like a, you know, late first round to, you know, second round, you know, draft pick. He's certainly talented. And, I think it just kind of makes me nervous, especially for a guy who, is coming from a family with injury history. But I do agree with Matt Harris. I do think that some of that, you know, the lack of the development, the, you know, maybe putting him in the right positions does fall on Romar. And, you know, Romar I know is close to the Porters, you know, but he's had a really rocky go now for like, you know, 10 plus years of coaching. And he's going to end up with at least 3 guys off of this last year's roster who are going to, you know, like one's already going to Alabama. Ayayi is, you know, getting interest all over the country and at all the best schools all over the country. You know, and if Porter ends up at Mizzou or not, like even if he doesn't end up in Mizzou, like he's still going to be like a, you know, high major SEC, you know, Big 12, like somewhere at that level. So, I mean, he wasn't doing anything with that roster, and so I do think a fair amount of that falls on Romar.
Yeah, and you know, part of me thinks like, would Javon just want to like go to CU? You know, go to Boulder, be near Mike. Tad Boyle's good coach.
I think there may be some hesitation with the family about spending time in Denver, and I don't say that flippantly, but seriously with what's happened with I believe it's the middle.
Yeah, Coben.
Between. Yeah. I would say that that's probably between that and Lorenzo Romar getting fired at Pepperdine. That's a lot of the reason why this smoke is coming out about coming back to Columbia, where it otherwise wouldn't have probably ever occurred.
Yeah.
I would say if Romar was back, we're not even talking about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. I would add one thing, and Sam, I don't mean to go back to you, but when we're talking about the Porters, we have to admit a lot of that drama we've discussed related to one particular basketball Porter. I at least in my experience, I did not hear much drama around Jonte. I found him to
No.
be a very good teammate, and there was none of that going on. And it's not that Michael's a bad kid or anything. It's just it was a circus with not only his injury but all of the national interest, and then we have national guys out here breaking the news that he's not going to play, that he's having surgery, and it was just I don't think the coaching staff was tied in with a lot of that, or that was not the case with Jonte or even any of his sisters who also played at Mizzou.
Yeah. And I say that like, the Porters by a lot of folks will, speak to their character as being good people and all that kind of stuff. I just think like for what happened with Michael, who can be a bit of a prima donna, and the way his family kind of handled those things behind the scenes, I didn't think, and part of it is maybe their first kind of go around, and maybe they've learned from it. It didn't really reflect well, and was frustrating for a lot of people who are trying to be involved and help, and were basically kind of shut out of the process. So again, I not being directly involved, this is all some talking to people in hindsight. Hopefully that there's a different approach. And I will also say this. Konzo Martin is a certain type of guy, and Dennis Gates is very different from that type of guy. And so, if you were to ask me, like, if you were to like go back to 2017 and say which of these guys would handle that situation better, I would say Dennis Gates. So it's entirely possible, also, that some of the way it was handled, does fall on the former head coach.
You're saying a guy that learned at the heels of Gene Katie was might have been a little gruff and a little get out there and tough it out.
yeah, like he, like Zoe,
a guy who played on no cartilage in his knees was a little bit.
Yeah. I like we love the guy, but he is a certain type of guy, and Dennis,
and he was open about it too. I mean, he wore his heart on his sleeve, to his credit.
Absolutely. All right, so the other guy that we need to probably talk about is the young man named Terrace Reed, who also entered the transfer portal. He is, for people who don't remember, he is a sophomore at Michigan this past year. He was a top target for Martin a couple of years ago, and Terrace is a former top 50 kind of recruit, top 60,
top 40 in the composite.
Yeah. And ended up in the 30s.
Yeah.
So 6'10", big, played high school basketball in St. Louis, so he is local. Dennis Gates can sort of point to Tamar Bates as sort of reviving, Bates, and as another guy who is like a top kind of recruit who sort of stalled elsewhere. I think I can't remember which one of you pointed out the connection of a former NBA head coach at the college as well, with Juwan Howard and Mike Woodson. Another good point, but it does seem like this is one of those situations where if Reed wants to come home, like, this could get done quickly.
Yeah, this has been a name that's been floating around probably since late December, early January as a possibility. And, even in mid-February, if you had polled national scouts, I think there was sort of a sense that, like, yeah, this is probably going to be a reboot. So this has been in the water for a while. I think the question's going to be, from, just, outside is, stylistic fit here. Terrace is a, people bemoan the change of the five, but he's a true back to the basket kind of guy, wants to play out of the post, can play and catch, or has shown in the past the ability to play kind of out of the mid post of the elbow. But he's going to play inside. He's going to defend fives. He's going to board. He's going to rim protect. You're going to throw the ball into him and you're going to try and play off of that. It's a little different, than I think how Mizzou has used its fives before. We've seen fives the last couple of years that have been spacing to the corner, guys that are going to step out. When Terrace was at, Chaminade and Link Academy, he showed the ability to maybe play kind of in that, 12 to 15 foot range as a face-up guy, but never really flash, stretching beyond the 3-point line. So I think the thing here is, if you're looking for a guy who has shown he can defend, high major fives, he can do that. Can he do it consistently? We'll see. Is this a situation where getting into a healthier environment, gets the motor consistent? We'll see. But he's shown that he can defend, fives in a really, really rough and tumble league. His freshman year, the block rate was pretty good, 5 or 6%, which is pretty good for a guy who's just going to wall up and play positionally. Can generate some steals for you in a sneaky way. I think he had a 2 or 3% steal rate, which is good for a big. Has a 20% defensive rebound rate. I think it could be a little higher, but as a floor, that's not bad. So if you're looking to bring in a guy who you can, toss the ball into, who can defend guys like Tolu Smith, like Tyrese Samuel, genuine brawlers in this league, Terrace can do that. I think the question's going to be fit offensively, but we've talked for the last 2 years about how Missouri could absolutely just use a reliable big to play post defense, get on the glass, toughen this team up along the front line. Terrace Reed can do that if he decides to come here. Mizzou, I think, is working that angle. We'll see how quickly that might transpire, but I think if the fit is there, this could be a pretty quick deal.
So I feel like we've reversed this because Watkins, you were leading the charge on Javon Porter, and I feel like you've been not quite at the front of the train here on Terrace Reed. I would say, like, of the three of us, I've probably been the most bullish on attempting to bring Reed back home. So I think this is sort of an interesting topic to discuss. I am for it. For all the reasons I sort of brought up before, like, I like the idea of bringing back guys that that were sort of highly rated and got away and have seen their stock kind of plateau a bit. He brings things that you need in interior defense and rebounding. Could some of the edge metrics be better? Yeah. But he's a guy where I think you sort of look at it the same situation as you did with Tamar, is like, we have a chance to kind of, bring him in, fix him, and make him, a real quality starter for us. And then you also have the benefit of him having a younger brother who's a top recruit. Watkins, what's your skepticism here?
When I'm looking at the screen, the two of you are at the top and I'm at the bottom. Does that appear the same way for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, well that's fitting then, since I'm happy to deal with both of you.
We're ganging up on you for this one.
I will point out that the reason is because you were the last to join. So whoever is first to join is here, and then second, sure. And then third.
Yeah, I mean, taking this back to Konza Martin, this isn't me saying yes or no on Terrace. It's just my view of it that, if Konza Martin was still the coach here, I would be leading the charge on Terrace Reed, no doubt. I think the way that the interior game is utilized by Mizzou and previously at Florida State, I struggle a little bit to see where Terrace fits in both offensively and defensively. When you look at the big men that Dennis Gates has been prioritizing in recent years, both at Cleveland State and how he used them, and then Kobe Brown here at Mizzou, you might sacrifice a little bit defensively for a hyper-skilled offensive player who can pass, dribble, and shoot. Does Terrace do all those things? Probably not. He's an average probably below average free throw shooter. So the question about whether he can step out and hit jump shots is certainly open. He definitely can bury guys in the post. He's probably an average efficiency guy with high usage down there, it's useful. But when you look at Mizzou's offense, the way that they get into post-ups isn't typically camping a guy out on the block and tossing it down there and letting him go to work. You're looking at UCLA cuts where you get a switch and then you hit a quick pass from the wing into the post.
Yeah.
Maybe a high-low here and there, or a dribble down from the perimeter into the post. More modern concepts. And then when you look at, I was guilty of this. I was recently watching Florida State film from the mid 2000s, 2010s, just to kind of get a feel for what they look like and what they were doing. They had guys that were 7 feet tall, 7'2", 7'4", could run, were pretty quick laterally, and were just defensive rim protecting monsters no matter where they were on the court. They could deflect shots wherever. I mean, they had guys chasing perimeter shooters down and knocking balls into the third row. Is Terrace that? Probably not. So, it's not that he's not a good player. I'm just conceptualizing where if you take a Javon Porter and a Terrace Reed, you don't really have a true defensive rim protector like the Florida State teams had, and you don't really have the hyper-skilled offensive three-way threat, so to speak, the Kobe Brown mold, and to what Noah Carter was trying to do and probably didn't quite successfully do this year. So that to me signals a complete change of what they're going to do, based on two guys who would probably come in here expecting to start. So, it's not a matter of me judging Terrace as a player. I think he's been very good and he has a lot of promise. And I think he could probably do well here at Mizzou, but you're going to have to change some things. And, what are you giving up in order to accommodate?
So what you're saying is you want to go get Cliff Omoruyi, is what you're saying.
If we're talking about Florida State style players, yes.
Yes.
He would certainly fit.
The one thing
I don't think it's going to be an option though.
No, I don't. These are all fair points on Terrace, and this is I guess the middle way here is, when Terrace was at Chaminade at Lincoln Academy, he was probably tracking closer to 235 or 240, and when he got to Michigan, they just packed on mass.
True,
and I think he's packed on 25 or 30 pounds there. And I watch him play, and I don't see the same sort of like functional mobility in sort of the mid post and high post. You used to be able to see that. They would have him, catch at the elbow at Chaminade, wheel out and make plays there. Drive it from the mid, drive it from the high post. He could make reads out of the high post. So one, is it a conditioning thing where they packed on mass so he could deal with the rigors of playing in a much more physical league? Two, we're seeing a stylistic thing where, you didn't see, Hunter Dickinson, you didn't see Olivia Conway, you don't see Michigan's bigs really being asked to be readers and connectors. I think if you go back and you watch Terrace's high school and AAU tape, there are instances where he's done that and he's been a little bit lighter in his frame. And I think you could find ways to functionally get him into catching and maybe ripping down and playing in those spots. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a question of if you get him in here, like getting in with Sean Conity and saying, okay, we need you to really trim things up a little bit and get him, not get him under 230 or under 225, but we need you just to get good weight on him and take some mass off. Because I think he can play and navigate. I just keep wondering if, he got to Ann Arbor and they're like, look, this is the Big Ten. We got to have you at 255, 260 to hold up here. And it's come at the, sacrifice of maybe some functional mobility. Your points about, everything else they want to do stylistically, totally valid. I'm just sort of wondering if you get him in, you shape him up, are you going to be able to find some compromises and some adjustments that are a little bit easier to navigate? Unclear, but I think that's sort of where I think you stand if you were to bring him in. And he had to buy in to that idea, but I think there's a path for him. But totally valid sort of points on your end there about why this may not be a perfect.
And I agree with what you're saying about the high school. I didn't have the benefit of watching a whole lot of his games back then. So, if he is that type of player underneath the cloth, then that's great. I just look at it right now. Something has got to change, be it what Mizzou's going to do or what Terrace is going to do for it really to work.
Correct. Totally.
So that's my only point. That's me being Mr. Negativity over here.
How dare you? How dare you?
So,
hey, you didn't impugn the character of an entire family, though. So
hey, yeah, that's me attacking everybody here. So we should probably at least bring up guards a little bit, because it seems like that's probably a much larger need for this team, is to somebody who can actually dribble the basketball. I will just sort of let you guys respond to this, but I feel like we're going to have a lot more clarity on the guard situation by next week, once we
hope
around this first week of NCAA tournament games. There's a lot of teams still playing basketball. There's not a lot of great guard options. I mean, there are a lot of options, but there's not a lot of great guard options. And I don't think that the right guy for Missouri is quite popped just yet. I know that they've reached out to Cameron Hunter. Or at least we should say contact was made. But that doesn't seem like it's going to be a fit. As if we could just shut that one down, I guess. And then Milton, Kyron Milton, right?
Kylan.
Yeah.
Kylan Milton from Arkansas Pine Bluff, who certainly gave it to Missouri in the season opener.
He did.
To the tune of 15 made free throws and 20
attempts. 30 burger on him.
He was the MVP of the game per KenPom. And what was that, like a 20 something point loss? 18 point. It was a loss for them.
It was a Mizzou win. Let's be clear on that.
Yes,
there weren't many.
Missouri won the game.
Let's celebrate.
But he was so good that he still got the MVP per KenPom.
Yeah.
But outside of that, and realistically, like if he comes in for a visit and he's a take. He's more rotational guard.
Yeah.
They need a primary lead guard.
Yeah.
And we don't really have a lot of clarity on that, and probably won't until next week.
Yeah. The Milton thing, I think my sense is that, there's a respect for the kind of meat and potatoes way that Milton plays. Like, if you look at his data and you call up the film, our guy wants to attack in middle ball screens. He can shoot the cover off the ball if he gets his feet set, and he's going to the rim in transition. And if he doesn't put it in, he's going to go to the line. And I think that there's always questions about, particularly if you're getting guys out of the SWAC or the MEAC, about how it's going to scale. When I looked at his top line, like his most used play types, there's really good efficiency there. So even if it's good enough to make you sort of feel a little bit better about coming out of the SWAC. But the question's going to be not a lot of assists, not a great assist rate. Even if you account for the jump he's going to make in program quality, you're going to see a severe dip in minutes and touches to uphold that efficiency, to the point where a reasonable projection would probably be him as a backup to a guy like Tamar Bates. And that's not to knock Milton. There are high majors looking at him. He's going to probably wind up at a high major, and who knows, maybe he makes me eat my spreadsheet. But I think there's a reason why there's maybe some hesitation, not a lot of people pushing in there, because the question of, is he going to project making that big of a jump from the number 30 league in the country to one of the top 5? That's a big jump. It's really big, and a lot you can go back. I do this every year and sort of input the SEC up transfers. Those spreadsheets are littered with dudes who put up 17, 18, 19 points for sub 300 teams in weak conferences, who get into the SEC and they're playing 35% of minutes with 18% usage. And it's like, man, the gaudy stat line did not, predict a bucket getter at the high major level. Milton's probably a good specialist at this level, if history's any indication, but that's not what Missouri needs right now. So I think there's a respect for what he brings to the table, but I'm just not sure he's going to fit the scale of what Mizzou needs at that position right now.
Yeah, he's not a point guard, but I was actually just typing in some stats here, looking them up, and Milton has a 89.1% free throw rate.
That's bonkers.
That is an absurd rate.
To put that in context, a good post player, a guy who's getting hacked in the low block to avoid scoring and teams looking at him as being a more inefficient option to send to the line, are usually hovering around 45%. This guy doubled that. He
as
shot
a guard.
as a 6'4" guard. He shot 220 free throws this year. And are we able to use obscene words on this?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I believe Dennis Gates said we fucking suck at getting to the free throw line.
Kylan doesn't.
This would be Dennis Gates saying, "Hold my beer." Milton is a guy who just absolutely lives at getting into the paint and getting into the rim. And there is, to me, value in that. Now, is he a starter at the high major level? I don't know. You would definitely need shooting around him. He's a good outside shooter, but he's not a high volume outside shooter. His game is getting to the rim. I don't think he's got quite the offensive creation pop to be a guy who sets other ones up.
No.
But if you're looking for a guy, in 80% of the games to be able to go in there and get 10, 12 free throws a night just on 10 or 12 possessions, there's your guy.
Well, I joked earlier. I joked
Mm-hmm.
earlier that, I think, Eric Musselman and Buzz Williams, need to have him on speed dial because, that's what A&M and Arkansas thrive. It's sometimes the only way that those two teams could score this year.
Right.
Was getting to the free throw line. So, what better way to just lean into that? I know that Missouri was not good, and it would kind of be nice to have a team that was at least average and not just bad. But I think I agree with you guys. I'm just not sure that he's what they need. At this point, if you're looking at, because I do think they will add, if they can, both Javon and Terrace. You really need two guards, and you need two guards who can handle the basketball. And Milton, to me, slots more at that wing. He is a little bit more like Tamari. He's not a guy that you want as a primary ball handler. And I feel like they need at least two guys that can handle that role. So your secondary guy at that position, and Milton looks to me like he would be that, needs to be a quality ball handler on top of that. That's just, again, sometimes we sort of speak into what we think the staff is going to do. Sometimes we think this is what the staff should do. And that's me saying, this is what I think they should do.
Yeah. Watkins has done a really nice job on Rocky and Plus with the portal, is keeping that update on who's jumped in. Probably Watkins, would you say probably the best top line point guard to jump in this week was Jacoby Gillespie of Belmont?
Yeah, I would. Yeah. And even then I still,
that's a scheme fit thing.
Me personally, I see him more as a combo. He was great at Belmont, but I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't know, but Belmont does not really rely on point guards to create offense.
No.
And Jacoby Gillespie really didn't do that. But, he was incredibly efficient at everything he did, and he's a very good player. But if you were looking at this like a 2022, 2023 Mizzou team where you have Kobe Brown on the floor, Jacoby Gillespie would be a tremendous player to have as your point guard.
Yeah.
If you're putting him in the Sean East role this year, not so much.
No. The only other one I thought that you and I really liked was Javon Small out of Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm.
Monster on ball creation. I think 60% of his touches are pick and rolls, ISOs, or handoffs. That's a bonkerific number, even for a high major level guy. The question with Small is turnover prone a little bit at times. Rim finishing there is average at best. I think he can shoot a little bit off the bounce, but that's a guy that I think, and he's a little bit undersized. I think he's probably 6'2", like a good on-ball creator, but there's going to be some issues there, I think, that you sort of encountered with Sean, which is Is the rim finishing going to be consistent enough? Is he going to be big enough positionally on the defensive end, to hold up? But those are probably the only two names that I would say jumped in this week that made me go, okay, yeah, I'd really be fine with them investigating that possibility. Otherwise, it's a lot of straight combos who've gone in, and I don't know if there's necessarily, like I'm looking at our list right now, probably what the top 7 or 8 combo guys that we've been tracking for a couple of months haven't jumped in yet. Maybe the other top 7 or 8 point guard options haven't jumped in yet. So to Sam's point, I think what we're going to see is probably starting Friday or Saturday, once we start seeing teams get knocked out of the NIT and NCAA tournament, you're going to start seeing the legitimate ball handlers that, can really elevate this roster start moving into the portal here. So to Missouri's credit, I think they've focused on the part of the market that offered them the best options right now. And Jacob Cruz was a big shot maker. He came in quickly. He'd been out there. They closed that down. Now I think they're maybe investigating some homecoming. We'll see ball handlers next week.
I was just looking over the list of players, and the only other additions that I would make to those that we discussed at the primary spot are Corin Johnson from Washington, who's a very good player.
He popped today.
He popped today.
He might profile a little bit better off ball, but he played on the ball and he was good. And then we had a very new addition today, Alston Mason from Missouri State, who maybe not exactly what Mizzou's looking for, but another guy who's going to get high major looks at the point guard spot. So
yeah. But that's the
maybe
thing.
it is what they're looking for. I don't know. I shouldn't speak for them, but he's going to get high major recruitment.
I think
Mason was a Kansas City kid who played for MoKan, went to
Oklahoma,
and then
ran with MoKan. He's from the JoCo side of the border. I think he's one of the Blue Valleys. And Blue Valley Northwest maybe. Had a really, really, this is before pre-portal back, when guys could still blow up their senior year and get recruited heavily in the spring.
Right.
A heady time, a more traditional time when not committing in the fall was not a death knell for a fringy prospect, but played well as a senior. Got a look from Porter Moser, who was coming in. I thought he was a perfect Porter Moser type kid. Little small, little bit light, but really hyper skilled. Could score the ball in a number of different ways. Kind of got buried in Oklahoma's bench. Porter needed to upgrade, talent that could help more right away. Alston jumps in the portal. Went and had some great games at Missouri State, but Dana Ford is having another exodus there,
including himself.
Oh, but this is the thing. Like I would say this to Alston Mason: if Ben McCollum is coming to Springfield, buddy, you might want to hop out of the portal and stay. They'll find a way to use you. Just same thing for like a guy like Sincere Parker at SLU. If Josh Schertz is coming from Terre Haute, just stick around. That guy will find out how to use you appropriately.
Right.
You don't need to go hunting. A guy who will know what to do with you is going to be there. Don't worry.
You have to exist in the 2 seconds that it takes from you getting the ball and you giving it to Robbie. Okay.
Of course. We can't have Robbie erasure on this pod, but no, I think that's the hard. I think if people are like point guard, they need a point guard. Where are the point guards? The good point guards you want are still playing.
There's going to be some good ones that come in, but they're not. They're trickling in at best, and the other positions are coming in faster.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam. Sorry.
No, I was going to pivot on if you have one last thought on that.
No, we've done enough looking at the board for transfers at this point.
So one last point of order is the exits, which we figured was going to happen. We don't have anybody that maybe wasn't expected so far. So Kurt Lewis, Jesus Carolero Martin, Mamor Majak, Magic Majak, man. I said it on Slack that look, I think objectively you could say he was not an SEC quality big. However, I enjoyed watching that dude play. He always played really, really hard, and he was 7'3" and gangly. and that was always at worst it was entertaining. I'm happy that and I think he's going to be able to go somewhere where he'll be more comfortable with the competition level. He'll hopefully get to play a lot. So thank you, Mabor, for your time at Mizzou. Kurt and Zeus, I think, were victims of kind of the same numbers game where they have additional eligibility if they want to use it. But the writing was kind of on the wall down the stretch that the minutes weren't going to be there for them next year. I think it was kind of easy to see that. So any final thoughts from you guys on either of those three or any of those three guys?
I think you could see.
Be nice.
I think you could see the thought process with both of them, bringing them in. I think this is, those guys, had certain things that this staff values. Kurt did shoot the ball pretty well at Logan. He was a guy who you could flex off the ball. He played in some actions and some styles at Logan that translated to what Missouri wanted to do. And I think I said in the preseason, if he was a guy that kind of had like a Dree-like year where, he's not elite, but he's an average level, replacement level wing for you, he could play himself into a reserve role. I thought that wasn't outlandish. But the thing that was premised on was the shot tool translating, and it never translated. And, that's the thing sometimes I think about JUCO guys is we talked about it, with last year with Mo Diarra, that you've really got to be in for a year for them to maybe go through growing pains. Well, Missouri's not in a position where that can happen.
Yeah.
The freshmen were coming in, they're going to expect to get developmental time. Tamar Bates is coming back. We talk all the time about, I don't like to dog players. I like to try and say, make an affirmative case for why this guy should have a bigger role or should be able to stay or should have minutes. And, I don't think Kurt shot the ball well enough to really make a clear case for, yes, you should come back and give me 10, 12, 15 minutes a game next year. I think defensively there were some issues at times, on the perimeter. This was a team that struggles defensively. It needs to get better there. So it was just hard, I think, if Kurt went in that room to make a case for, here's the things I've done well that are going to help you win basketball games next year. And that's not, to say he's an awful player. He showed good things at Logan. They just didn't translate. And there's not enough time now for where this program is and its build to really say, okay, we'll come back and we'll let you try and get another crack at it. I think if I was skeptical of any pickup last year, it was Carolero. I think I made that pretty clear at the time throughout the rest of the year. I could put on a couple of games and, see the flashes and, why this staff wanted him. But you would look at the rest of the sample size and, against good competition, top 100 teams, and the efficiency just wasn't there. And if it wasn't there at, decent minutes at a high major league and, a average mid-major league, it certainly probably wasn't going to pop when you got here. I think that was sort of a reach there. I don't know what necessarily maybe prompted that eval, but I think we saw, situations where, this staff tried to look at the upside play there and it just didn't translate. And it gets back to what we're talking about this year, which is, Jacob Cruz, we know what he does. Maybe it doesn't translate, but there's a big enough sample size I can look at and say, he shot the ball well there. I saw him do it for a year at the at the Division I level. Even if he regresses slightly coming to Mizzou, it's going to go from 40% shooting from three to 35, 36%. That's better than what they were getting last year. So I think it's just a case of maybe they over evaluated some guys. Those guys couldn't make affirmative cases. So you move on and you try and find, guys that are going to be able to give you what you need next year.
Mr. Watkins, any closing thoughts?
It's my turn. Okay. Yeah, I think with Jesus, I saw what they were doing. I think he obviously didn't pan out to what they would have hoped for, but I also think it's part and parcel that no one on the team really stepped up to replace Kobe Brown. No one was going to fill his shoes, but to act as that high post creator, we'll call it, that Noah Carter spent some time there, but it just didn't really click. And when you don't have your first option clicking in that, your second option really shouldn't, and there's no virtue to even continuing to do it if
Yeah.
neither of them are producing. So that kind of got phased out as time went on, and I think that's a lot of the reason why his time got cut down. And when you take that aspect of his game away, you can't build the team around him doing that. But then when you take that away, he doesn't really have a role on the team. He's not a spot up shooter. He's not a driver. He's not a post up guy. What's he going to do? So you saw his time get whittled down quite a bit in the conference slate, especially late in the year. And the same thing happened with Kurt Lewis for different reasons. It was simply, as Matt Harris said, not being able to knock down shots. I think in the last 8 or 9 games, he played in one for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That one to me is not surprising, just because the coach is telling you what he's going to do. If you can't play on this team, how are you going to play on a team that we want to be better?
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the thing we talked about in the middle of the year. People talking like, why aren't they going all in on the freshmen? Why aren't they just throwing it in? From I think probably like mid-January through mid-February, the thought was, now's where we're going to let you guys go. Your veterans is your last go round. Show us that you can get us out of this. We have some injuries. We have some depth stuff. You got to step in. Show us you can pull us out of the ditch. And that didn't happen. And once they got, Sean East back, once they had, some modicum and stability there, once, Trent, started to try and work back a little bit, it made sense just to say, we saw 7 or 8 games of this show. We gotta go move on, and we got to give opportunities to other guys here to see if they can, at least find some traction, find some confidence. So I think you're right. The writing was on the wall over the last 4 or 5 weeks. It just is what it is. It's unfortunate those guys, had a shot here and they just couldn't make it work. But that's sort of the reality we live in right now. The runway for guys is shorter than it ever has been.
And then I will say for Mabor, last year's role, I think, was befitting of what you'd expect from him at a high major. This year was overextended, and that's nothing against him, but it is going to be his last year, so I don't fault him for wanting to go play. Yeah. And it for any of these guys, they've each got 1 year of eligibility left. They want to play, and they deserve that chance. So I thank them for their service and wish them the best of luck.
Yeah, I agree with that, especially on Mabor. Like, he's been with Dennis, now all 4 years.
Yeah.
And having the opportunity to really go out, because Gates, realistically, there's going to be a new athletic director next year. Whether or not we agree with it, like, there's a chance that Dennis Gates goes into the year on the hot seat and kind of needing to prove himself. I personally think like he should have a bit of a larger window considering what happened in year 1 and consequently what happened in year 2. But the reality is like Mabor was not going to play next year. So yeah, I enjoyed that he did get to play this year. Like, it was fun. Like, if Missouri's going to be bad, like, I at least want to be able to like have fun, like watching a 7-3 guy just kind of like baby deer his way around the floor.
And he had that putback slam. I forget who that was against, but
that was against Tennessee, wasn't it?
I think it might have been A&M.
It was Tennessee.
Was it Tennessee? Yeah, because it was like a huge early moment in the game when they were fighting the.
He soared in from nowhere.
Now Levi's going to make the headline. Sorry, basketball. I want it to be fun when it's bad, and that's going to be that's the headline.
So this is we're going to wrap this up now, but this is sort of a new thing. This is our first live broadcast for Rock M Plus subscribers. If you are not a subscriber to Rock M Plus and you want to join our live broadcast, go ahead and sign up at rockm.plus. I'll even put this on the screen because all these episodes will eventually make their way to YouTube and available for everybody to watch on YouTube. They just won't be live. And so yeah, so I would encourage people to sign up. In particular, the forums are buzzing with this guy, this guy, this guy, and then also this guy doing a lot of chatting and whooping it up about different prospects, and it's certainly a lot of fun in there. So head over rock'em.plus, get signed up. For those that are watching this delayed, to the folks who are watching us, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate the views, and we're gonna do this regularly. So I guess we'll be back next week when hopefully we have point guards to talk about. So until then, everybody, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.